Hi, I'm Jim Hooper with Hooper Photographic Studios. I've heard that as a photographer, it's important to always keep growing and moving and improving your game. And I've recently had a number of people that have reached out to me and asked me to do a series of videos on how I like to edit images. And so today I'm going to be taking a crack at doing something I've never done before, and that is creating a recording of my editing process. So this will be a first try and we'll see how it comes out, but I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. This is a photo shoot that I did yesterday with one of my favorite models by the name of Eliza. After the shoot, I came home and I downloaded about 150 images. I culled it down to about 50. She then selected her favorite 12 images from the set, and that's what we're going to do right now is to take a look at these images. Down here in the bottom strip, this is our thumb strip, you'll see all of the images that she had selected as being some of her favorites. And so I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this image here, number 9400. And right off the bat, a couple of things stand out to me. This bright highlight right here is rather distracting, as is this bright highlight here, not as badly, but I do want to try to knock that down just a little bit. And I want to kind of darken this down just a touch. Most importantly, I want to try to bring a little bit more light into her face and into the shirt, especially on the shadow side of her shirt. So that's going to be my plan right now, is to try to go through some of those things, and then we'll go through and do a little bit of skin smoothing and some overall toning of the image. So right here in Photoshop, or excuse me, in Lightroom, I'm going to start by adding a radial filter, and I'm going to go ahead and drop this in right here on the background metal. So we'll drag out this radial filter, and I'm just going to place it and rotate it so that it's going to hit that. And I'm just going to use this to try to knock down my highlights right there in the metal. Now you notice that because we're only knocking down the highlights, it's not darkening down the rest of the stuff. It's not knocking down her shirt, it's not darkening the shadows like it would have if I were to just drop the overall exposure like that. So by using the highlights, that works out pretty well to knock that down. We'll go ahead and take that. I'm also going to do the similar filter right here on the sidewalk that's a little bit broken up. We'll drop the highlights there and probably drop the whites just a bit as well. And that's okay with me. I'm not so sure that I'm going to knock down that brickwork after all. I think I'm okay with that. But what I am going to do is I'm going to grab my adjustment brush here, and I want to brighten up the face and the shirt just a little bit. So I'm going to open up my my brush, and I'm going to go ahead and brighten up that shirt. I just selected the shirt, and I'm going to brighten that up a little bit. And then I think I'm going to also drop down my brush a little bit and brighten up her face and her hair just a touch as well. Now right now we're on the same adjustment brush, so whatever I've adjusted with the shirt, I'm also adjusting to the face. And that works out okay with me. We'll go ahead and commit that, and I think I'm going to add one more adjustment brush to bring out the legs here just a little bit. I'm going to brighten them up. I'm going to open up the shadows a bit to try to get those legs to shine just a little bit more. Her lower body is in the shadows where they are, so we want to just kind of open that up a bit. And I'll probably just do a little bit of overall brightening to bring out all of that, and maybe even also bring out a little bit of this dark spot of the wall. Now I get to see a little bit more of what I was looking to see, and so that works out okay for me. I'm good with what we've got there. From here, I think I will go ahead and open this. I'm going to take this image, and although you can't see it on the recording, I'm just going to click right click, and I'm going to click edit in, and I'm going to say edit in Photoshop, and that will open up this image into Photoshop, and that should be happening here in just a second. Let's see if that's going to open up. There we go. Perfect. All right, so here we are in Photoshop. And actually, there's not a lot that I want to do here, but I typically will come into Photoshop and do the fine skin retouching. So I've got an action here that I've been using for quite a while called frequency separation. This is a technique that I learned from the guys over at Flurn.com. And though this image actually doesn't show a lot of the skin blemish, we do want to go ahead and with the frequency separation, oh, I didn't run it. We'll run the frequency separation. What it's going to do is actually separate out the textures from the colors. And so over here in the layer stack, you'll see texture layer and a blur layer, and you can turn those off. So if you turn off the texture, you get a very blurry image. If you turn off the blur, you get a very crunchy, crispy image. And by blending those two together with a linear light blend, you get a pretty normal looking image. But it gives us the ability to edit both of those layers independently. So I'm going to take my clone stamp brush on the texture layer, and I'm going to drop my opacity somewhere around 50 to 60%. I'm going to identify a source from clean, good textured skin, and I'm just going to kind of brush that in over anything that might not be ideal as far as the texture goes. As I said, there really isn't much here to work on with this particular image. Not much at all, in fact. So now I'll go ahead and go to the blur layer, and in the blur layer I'm going to take my lasso tool, and I've got about a 20 pixel feather on this tool, and I'm going to go ahead and add to that selection just the main sections of skin on her face. This may help me to knock down things like this highlight right here. We'll see what this is going to give me. And now that I've got that area selected, I'm going to apply a filter. It's going to be our Gaussian blur. I'm going to set it for fairly low, 5-6 pixels, something like that. And if I have to reapply it, I can certainly hit the Gaussian blur a couple times. It's actually not doing too awfully much, which is okay. I feel like this image is pretty sharp as it is. So I feel pretty good about what we're looking at right now. I thought there would be more blemish to pick up. I know it was silly cold yesterday, and so there was some goosebumping going on, so maybe we'll just try to see if we can take some of this clean skin tone from the belly and use that to kind of soften up the goosebumps that were going on there. I think that'll work just fine. And already I'm liking this image, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do a little bit of final toning. I'm going to take this image and I'm going to open it up into another program called On1. However, before I do that, I need to have one clean layer. Now I could go ahead and flatten out the entire layer, but instead I'm going to hit Control, Shift, Alt, and E on a PC to stamp a whole new layer that has all of the layers of data underneath it. And that will give me one layer that I can now open with On1. So we'll go to On1 Effects, and that'll open up here in just a minute. It does take a minute for this program to open up. All right. Now, once we get into here, you'll notice there's a bunch of filters on the left-hand side, and all those are like preset filters. So you see presets everywhere. On1 works with presets, but they also give you the ability to fine-tune and clean up your presets. So, over here we've got a whole series of different types of filters that we could apply. We could do some hipster type filters and do some really crazy, funky, stuff, toning the overall image in different ways. I don't generally like to use the hipster very often. I do like cinematic and I do like black and white. Here in cinematic, one of the ones that I use the most is a preset that I've got called Dark Lark. And it is a preset that I've made that's a kind of a combination of several different ones. But I do like the way that the Dark Lark kind of pops the colors here a bit. If I drop it back to if I drop the opacity on this layer, you'll see what it looks like without that filter, and then adding the Dark Lark kind of just pops the darks. Does bring back a little bit more of the contrast, and that's okay. But I can go in and I can adjust the levels of split toning or color enhancement that we've got going on. I could add I could add, say a vignette here, or I could add a vintage feel to it. Whatever of these filters that I wanted to add in, I could, but I think I'm going to leave it just like that and call that image done. Now, when on one reopen in Photoshop, and it's going to bring this version of the image in as a layer on the layer stack in Photoshop. Good. So now you can see down here in the layer stack, you've got the on one photo raw image right there. And just like any other layer, I can drop the opacity of that layer to give me more or less of that. Now I will say that in the original image here, I really like what we had done with her hair. It really kind of popped it red. And the dark lark, we kind of lost some of that. So I'm going to try to paint some of that back in. And what I'm going to do is to add a layer mask on my on one layer. I'm going to grab a paintbrush and I'm going to set my paint color to black. I'm going to set my opacity nice and low. And I'm simply going to zoom in here to the hair and I'm going to brush in the hair and try to get that original hair to show through the on one layer mask, or excuse me, the on one layer correction. So by simply painting in that layer, we bring back some of the reddish texture of that image. I kind of like that. We can always go back and see if I liked it better before or after using the history palette. But I'm feeling pretty good with this. So from here, I'm just going to go ahead and close this. It's going to ask me if I want to save. I'm going to say yes. And when I save it, it's going to save everything back into Lightroom. So let's go back over here into Lightroom. And you'll notice here in Lightroom, it will be bringing it back in. It'll actually bring it in as a thumbnail down here. And it'll be labeled as the 9400-edit.tiff. That's what's going to happen when I bring back a Photoshop image into Lightroom. So now I have the original version that we had done some original Lightroom edits in. And then the second version, the edit version, is going to be a combination of our Photoshop edits as well as our on one edits. And then from there, I could go ahead and export that image. Oh, let's go ahead and export that image. I typically will export all of my images twice. I will save them to the same folder and then create a subfolder called Web Edits. For the ones that are going to be saved at 2100 pixels on the long side, that would be our web resolution. I'm not going to bother putting any sort of watermarking on it, anything like that, and then simply export it. I would then typically also go back and create another version of that same image, but I wouldn't resize it. I would leave it at full size and put it into a subfolder called Full Resolution. I can always go back into Lightroom and create full res or low res versions of each image. But for right now, I think this is what I'm just going to leave it as. Because I have edited this one though, I am going to mark this as a 5-star image, and that'll put it into my category of 5-star edited images. So if I filter by only the 5-star images, you'll see these are the images that I've already edited from this set. So we have this one that I edited yesterday, this one that I just edited for you on the video, and then this one is another one that I had started to edit yesterday. Actually, I did finish editing this one yesterday. So those are my editing processes, and I hope that was helpful for you. Like I said, this is the first time I've ever done a video on editing like this, so I hope it was worthwhile. I hope it wasn't too painful for you to watch. I do hope that you consider joining us next time. And if you have any questions or suggestions for videos you'd like to see, by all means shout them out and I'd be happy to help you out. Thanks so much for watching.